Western civilization is moving closer to a point of irreconcilable, unstable equilibrium, as frighteningly increasing numbers of people trust nothing. Media, academia, and especially the governments are no longer held in high esteem. Regaining trust is often impossible after betrayal. However, transparency is essential to any healing process, and that is the essence of the Don Sullivan Show. Please listen to the team explore, probe, and debate cutting-edge science, technology, and computing. Play ball! Welcome back, everyone, to the Don Sullivan Show, the show where we discuss all things science, technology, and computing on a level that can be understood and absorbed by your average teenager. I am so happy to have you all back today, because today is going to be one of our best episodes, maybe one of our best episodes ever. Of course, we're really early into this whole foray, but I have a very, very special guest on to speak with, Dr. Theo Hodge, my oldest and dearest friend. We'll introduce him here in a second. But I'm your host, Don Sullivan. Let me start off by allowing my host and partner, my co-host and partner, Mr. Jersey Steve, to say hello to you all to start this all off. Say hello, Steve.
Greetings from the Garden State. I'm excited that we have a doctor in the building.
Yeah, well, so today, as I've told you, we will be doing a lot of Don Sullivan shows from all over the world. We'll leave that for a surprise. We're going to be at any given point in time. But today, we're in my office basement in Denver or Littleton, Colorado. Again, we'll have more episodes as time goes along from a lot of different places, but that's where we are today. We got to start this off again. I always hate doing this, but our lawyer's insistence, I need to read out loud the obligatory disclaimer waiver. So here we go, folks. And again, before I introduce you, Dr. Theo, but all statements by the host and the guests on the Don Sullivan Show are the personal opinions of the hosts and the guests, all of whom agree that the following content is the property of Zanalytics LLC to be used publicly and exclusively on the Don Sullivan Show. Everybody good with that? Nobody's going to yell and scream. And if there's ever a problem, we'll just remove it. We'll remove whatever has been said that somebody doesn't like, or we'll remove the whole show if we need to, but not today. Today, because we'll have this special guest, Dr. Theo Hodge. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Hodge before we start off. In September of 1980, I got to meet Dr. Theo Hodge when I first, as a New Jersey wannabe Springsteen kid with a white T-shirt, showed up at the University of Virginia's track team first practice and sat down and had no idea where I was at, and met my good friend here, Theo Hodge, who was also a distance runner, middle distance runner, scholarship athlete, who was an immensely talented 800-meter runner who was a year ahead of me, and just a wonderful human being overall, and led me through some very great difficulties in my first number of years at the University of Virginia. Well, Theo went on to graduate after he became an All-American half-miler, 1,500-meter runner, but particularly 800-meter runner, half-miler. I will also say that the two of us still hold a record for the 4x1,500 meters at the University of Virginia after 44 years at 15:09 from the dogwood relays at the University of Tennessee in 1981 in late April. Theo went on to become a doctor in internal medicine, is also an infectious disease expert. He also is a true war hero, and I say that not being tongue-in-cheek at all. He was on the border of Kuwait when our troops went over into Iraq in 1991. There is a funny story we might talk about later about how AT&T provided phones after the battles were over to be able to call home way before cell phones, which is probably embarrassing to a lot of people who are still at that company. But we may get into that at some point or in the future. We're going to have Theo on hopefully a number of different times. And Theo, as I said, is an infectious disease expert, but today we are going to talk about a different theme. That theme is, why are Americans so sick? Why do we all have so many chronic diseases? And I'm going to use myself as one of the demos for this call and this discussion because, quite honestly, I'm in great shape overall. I climb mountains. I live in Colorado. I'm overall really strong, but I have a lot of chronic issues, and Theo helps me a lot with that. And she's the first person I talk to, no matter what medications we're on, which will be other subjects of the Don Sullivan Show. But we're going to talk about this here, and I'm going to be very, very open about my particular situation. So, Dr. Theo Hodge, please say hello and introduce yourself before we get into the specific questions.
Why, hello. I am honored and consider it a huge privilege to be a guest on the Don Sullivan Show. Don, as you have heard, has been a very good and special best friend, actually. I have turned to him for many, many an issue over the years. We've known each other since our hair was black, and it isn't anymore, I can tell you.
I still have it. He still has it, but definitely different colors.
Yeah, exactly. So I am currently an internist. I have a subspecialty in infectious diseases, and back in May of 2019, I got together with a few other physicians, and we founded what is called the Washington Health Institute. And this is where I serve as medical director. The patient practice that I have is a large one. I do primary care medicine. I have an emphasis on people living with HIV, and I have an emphasis on those who are at risk for HIV. But I do everything in terms of taking care of patients above the age of 18. That's a little about me.
So we folks are going to have a number of different discussions about HIV and the history and other extremely significant infectious diseases. But today, Theo, Dr. Theo, I'm going to refer to you that way because it really is important that the audience understand that level of expertise, despite our familiarity. Am I right? Are Americans as sick as I think they are?
Well, when I think about what I see in my practice, I certainly see in terms of chronic diseases. If I named the top three off the top of my head, I would say HIV, because remember what I just said about what I specialize in. But then the next two would be hypertension, 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 hypertension.
High blood
And then
pressure.
high blood pressure. That's right. High blood pressure. It's a biggie. And then after that comes diabetes, 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 and then high cholesterol, high cholesterol, high cholesterol. So high blood pressure is something. It's the thing about my practice. Again, I told you the number one thing is HIV. So people get that. They're like, okay, Dr. Hodge, I will take your pill. I understand why I need to take this pill. But when it comes to high blood pressure, what I get is, I feel good. I feel good. Why are you trying to get me to take another pill when I feel good? And my standard response is, of course you feel good until you don't. And that's a problem, because by the time you don't feel good, then there's some irreversible stuff going on. And so why do we have to go there before we actually address these issues? So in terms of chronic medical problems, high blood pressure, diabetes, and squeaking in there, almost a tie with diabetes, because they go hand in hand, is high cholesterol.
So Theo,
Hyperlipidemia.
you in the audience don't see this, but he's looking directly at me in the video screen that we're looking at, and despite the fact, and I'm the perfect example of what he's talking about, because I feel great. I can climb mountains. I can actually still even run despite a lot of orthopedic issues. I don't have any issues with high blood pressure, although I have had a heart attack. I am diabetic, and I have been for a very long time, probably a lot longer than I realized, and I do have chronic high cholesterol, even though it's under control with lots of the different medications that are prescribed for us and are required of me to take right now. Theo and I have talked about this. I'd love to get off them. As to one apparently that I'm never going to be able to get off of, the statins. But I do feel great. So what can I tell you, Theo? How can I deal with this? And how can I deal with this emotionally when I feel, for the most part, great, other than when something bad happens, of course, like when I almost died
Dr.
of a heart
Theo,
attack.
has Don told
Yeah.
you about the Jimmy Dean breakfast bowls? He was
God.
asking about healthy breakfast choices.
Okay, now
Well, he's
I
neglected,
we were going to
Steve,
get
to
personal
mention that
here, Stephen,
little
but you
teeny
know
fact.
that. Come on, go ahead, Theo. Tell me how bad I am.
So no, I will say this, because this is, again, in my practice, I'm all about partnering with the patient so that we partner together to enhance their quality of life as it relates to their medical concerns. I usually give my job description as to present the options to their medical concerns to the best of my ability based on my education and now my nearly 30 years of practice. And then I give my patients a job description, because this is very important in a patient-doctor relationship. The patient's job description is active, and I spell it out, ACTIVE, active participation in their healthcare. That is an absolute for me, because if we don't do our job descriptions, the relationship doesn't work. So in terms of chronic medical concerns, and my friend Don over there, in terms of heart disease, because heart disease, while I did not mention that as a chronic condition, the issue is there are at least 5 absolute risks of dropping dead of a heart attack. Guess what they are? Diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol.
I'm checking the list off here. Keep going.
And the other 2, I'm certain you don't have, and that's smoking.
No, don't smoke.
And nicotine abuse can be listed, as a chronic medical problem. The last one, though, is family history. And the family history, and this is an absolute as opposed to relative. When I say relative, if you're overweight, that's a relative risk factor, because people who are not overweight are less likely to have heart disease. You're being over the age of 35, because people under 35 are usually not dropping dead of heart attacks. So again, these are, being a male, men are more likely to have heart disease than women. These are relative risk factors as opposed to absolute risk factors. The final risk factor is the family history. That is if you have a dad or a brother 55 or less when they had their first event, or a mother or sister 65 or less when they had their first event. So when I'm looking at my chronic medical concerns, since heart disease is a major reason why we die, so I am usually very much focused on, let us aggressively control the risk factors we have and know that are absolute risk factors to prevent you developing or dropping dead of a heart attack. Now, I can't do a thing about genetics. Nothing. Can't do anything about that. But the other 4, as I said, smoking, diabetes, high cholesterol, and high blood pressure, yes. And that's why I get into these very intense discussions with my patients, who look at me and go, and Doc is not a pill pusher here. And I hear Don, because me and Don have had these discussions. He's like, well, I want to be on all these medications and da-da-da. And I'm like, let me tell you something. Your statin, you're going to stay on that, okay? I'm just telling you, no
I'm here. That's what I'm hearing from
ever say to
everybody.
you to come off a stat, like, ever.
So, Theo, why the hell are Americans so sick? I mean, because why? I mean, obviously, I'm very, very active. I am very strong. I lift weights. I climb mountains. I do a lot. I do more than 99% of 40-year-olds. Why? Why did this happen to me? And why are Americans so sick?
And help it, start singing in my head, climb every mountain. I feel like, Sound of Music should be playing in the background.
I am not Julie Andrews. Best I can do is a bad imitation of Springsteen.
You should see the way he
that's
dances on top of the mountains. Arms
Forget the
stretched out.
dancing. Born to Run is in my head all the time, but that's it. All right?
That would be a much different movie if Don played the Von Trapp, father.
Yeah.
Christopher Plummer. I love the guy. I hope it. Mary Poppins either. So don't okay, we're digressing. Get back to my question. Why are people so sick?
Well, let's think about this, Don. I mean, it's the evolution of technology, convenience. I mean, you are an exception, but people actually getting up and exercising, think about it. When I lived in Europe, because I was there for 3 years, all the Europeans would go out on a stroll. Every evening after dinner, they would go strolling. Exercise, exercise. As opposed to people now, what's exercise? I mean, of course, you have the exceptions. You have your athletes, you have the people who are out there deliberately exercising. But I can tell you the majority of my practice, well, that's not true because I service a largely LGBTQ plus practice and they tend to exercise. But I can tell you the other part of my practice, what's exercise? Okay. What's a gym? And when I say that, I mean, when's the last time you went to the gym? I've actually had people say, well, I saw Jim yesterday, and I'm like, no, 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 no. We're talking about GYM, not JIM. Okay, let's not get this twisted. So, Don, people are not as active as they once were. Of course, obviously, that means they're going to gain weight, which we talked about the relative risk of heart disease because of obesity. Obesity in this country, ooh, wow! You talk about an epidemic. Ooh. That's one reason. And then think about diets, particularly for those people who travel. Don, since when
I've
are
stayed at
you
home
able?
today. All right, I'll give you that.
I'm just saying, how can you eat well? How can you even as a physician, I tell people all the time, look, I have a basic sense of what is healthy. But if you really want to get down to the nuts and bolts, I'm going to send you to a nutritionist, okay? So, and I ask people, I'm like, do a food diary. Do a food diary and show up to the
Yeah,
nutritionist.
I've been to nutritionists, and they basically say stop eating everything you're eating,
Yeah, and
then
I hear
that's
you.
it.
I tell the patient because here's and this is no lie. The nutritionist is going to be 120 pounds. They've never ever had a weight problem, and they think you're going to eat watercress all day. And I'm like, watercress is cool. It's cool. I like watercress.
Kale. They want me to eat kale.
Oh,
Kale is the unholy alliance.
I mean, I
It's a
get it.
superfood.
So,
Kale is the
exactly,
unholy alliance between cardboard and lettuce.
But
So let's,
I hear you. But my thing is, if you're going to see a nutritionist, do a food diary and then make them look at you, not read out of some book and say, look, girl, no. How about
I
a
did this
real
with
diet?
my new doctor.
Hmm?
I did this with my new doctor for a month. And he looked at it and he kind of threw it across the table with me and said, you just eat horrible.
Exactly.
But at least you're eating less because now I'm on non-journal.
Nutritionist. She needs to give you a real diet that you can actually follow. It can't be watercress. It can't be lettuce. It can't
Has to be
like,
realistic, or
it
you'll
has
give
to be
up.
realistic.
All right,
You have to be.
so let's talk about this. One of these days, when the Don Sullivan Show becomes famous and we're really important, Steve, we're gonna have Kelly and Casey Means on, one of the two of them. And if you're listening, you guys can come on anytime you want, but we're going to have them on, and they are going to, of course, mostly talk about the horrific nature of the food industry and the food structure in the United States, and the entire redevelopment of the food pyramid from the 70s that told everybody to eat pizza. So, what's really, I mean, we were kids, Theo. I was like, eat pizza, drink milk,
It's your food group.
Exactly.
And the food
McDonald's,
group, and a dessert was a food group. So,
As guys from New Jersey, I don't want to see. I'm not going to sit here and let you take pot shots at pizza.
Well, this is pizza was on before the pizza connection was broken by Giuliani. You had a pizza parlor in every corner from Boston to Philadelphia. We know that. We all hung out in them.
A nice tomato pie.
The Theo is without being too flippant here, this so much gets down into the type of foods and the structure. Obviously, there is these present controversies of the red dye number 3 and 40, which are finally been removed from FDA approval, as well as what I've learned is not just the seed oils, which we know about, versus the other oils, avocado and olive oils, which half of which apparently are fake too. But it's bread. It's incredible, and we've kind of known this for a while. I remember Oprah's huge epiphany on one of her last shows about how bad bread was. I never believed that until I actually started doing real blood sugar tests, and you do it, and 2 hours after you've had a piece of bread, all of a sudden you're up in the stratosphere if you're as sensitive as I am. I mean, why is this? Yeah. Go ahead, Steve. Before Theo
you told me that story
eviscerates me.
about Subway and the bread there, or maybe it was Quiznos. You were talking about that. You were at an airport.
It was one of them, which we won't blame because it's all of them, right?
Yeah, that's true. Well, my question is it just the bread here that's bad? Is the bread in Europe
Yes,
okay?
that is the question.
But I guess beyond that,
But what's going on there,
are
Theo?
carbs
We'll shut up here.
carbs the enemy?
When I'm over in Europe, particularly when I lived in Germany, I was not surrounded by obese people. I can remember.
Yeah, what is that? In Italy and France, they drink wine and eat pasta, and nobody's fat. Well, explain that to me.
Well, I mean, in Germany, I always say it's because they're out walking. Every time I turn around, they're walking. And in France, I mean, I was there in Paris, in 2023, and these little Frenchmen who all had 28-inch waists, I kept staring like, how do you have this waist? And they said, we walk everywhere. We walk. Even down in the metros. Remember, we have elevators. They don't have elevators in the Paris metro. There's no such thing. Those people walk up and down those million, did you hear me? Million stairs to get down and up from a subway. They are exercising. They are moving. They
portions
are active.
Too, right? The portions are smaller.
They eat food like you. I'm just like, how can you eat all this food and have a 28-inch waist? I mean,
yeah, don't tell me. Go to Rome. Go to Rome, and you won't be through the appetizers, and you'll be done before they actually start serving you food. And so, portion control is important, but that doesn't happen there necessarily. Not in restaurants, at least.
Well, again, activity. You're an exception because you're climbing mountains and doing all this other stuff, but Americans are lazy. They don't move. They lay. Every time you see commercials, people are laying in the sun, and that's because they're laying in the sun. They're always eating. I mean, if you're always sitting there laying in the sun and eating, what do you think is going to happen? Okay, you're going to get big
I'll
and
ask
fat.
you this
At least you're getting vitamin
from
D.
a clinical.
Well, I mean, and that depends on what's going on. If you have complete sunblock on, you ain't gonna get that either. So
that's interesting. I didn't know that. So it blocks
vitamin
D.
The recommendation from the Dermatology Association is you're supposed to have 20 minutes of unblocked sun a day. 20 minutes, no more than that. And they have to be very careful because, of course, if you have more than that, you could be subjected to skin cancer. So it's always walking
set of pathologies.
I feel better when I'm sitting in the sun, though. There's definitely something to that. When you get a lot of good sunlight, you feel better.
You do. I mean, vitamin D is important, of course, in your bone health. Bone health. Did I say bone health? In your bone health. It's in your immune health, your prostate health. And people think, oh, I can just consume enough dairy products that I can have adequate vitamin D. Wrong. And if you're a person of color, you're much more likely, because we have a natural sunblock, to have low vitamin D. I mean, my vitamin D, when I first started measuring it, was like, non-existent. I was horrified. So, I mean, that's one thing that I supplement on, because I recognize not only is vitamin D very important in your bone health and your immune health and prostate health, it's also important in your mental health. So if you talk to my mental health providers that I work with, they will tell you in a heartbeat, I recommend vitamin D. So all of these things, they play together to improve your health and enhance your overall quality of life. Because if you're in bad health, your quality of life ain't gonna be there.
So let's add another aspect into this conversation. One that is uniquely, but not exclusively American, and that is stress. And the stress that is American, because we work so much more than anybody else, anybody else in human history, and we work in a fashion that is amazingly sedative, or we don't move that much. We sit in chairs to a very large extent, we spend an enormous amount of time, whether it's for recreational purposes or just work in front of computer screens. And we spend so much time with our families. Our kids do so much. We spend so little time on ourselves. And we have so much of a situation, so there's so much stress in the situation of our lives in the sense that we just don't know what's going to happen the next day. And I'm not just talking about federal workers in February of 2025. This has been the case for everybody in Silicon Valley, for example, in the last 50 years. But the truth is, everybody in the United States, and it's worse here than any place else in human history. How much of a factor, how much does the stress amplify these other issues that we've talked about? Do you
My
think?
God. Okay, let's talk about this for a moment, okay? Because I make it very clear when I'm, taking my initial intake. If you're coming in for a physical, we're doing this entire history. And, I'll do a sexual history because I'm like, okay, sex is part of your overall medical health. And if I don't know about it, hey, I'm not doing my job. So I ask all the questions about that. And then we get to mental health. And people look at me, and because there's some cultural differences here. I mean, the African American community, the Latino community, they're like, what's a mental health provider? We don't do that. We just solve our own problems. We would never think. And I have to, I said, oh, hold up. Let's talk about this. Because number one, your mental health is a major part of your overall health. And if
Does
you
that
don't
work?
address that, that's a problem. So when you're asking these questions and you're talking about stress and you're talking about the other diagnoses that, especially because I'm in Washington, D.C., yes, when you talk about federal thing, I can't, it's just drama.
This must be awful right now. This must be awful for you.
Drama because of all these people
Yeah.
losing their jobs. But in general, you're right. Even before all this happened, we're in Washington, D.C., where people are just always stressed. I mean, generalized anxiety is the most common mental health diagnosis I have in my practice. Everybody and their mother has generalized anxiety. And we talk about, well, how can you address this? You do, and you're around uplifting people. I mean, the doom and gloom, the world is a horrible place, and no, we can't do that. You do the things that uplift you. Go to the movies, go to the plays, go into the gym. How about this is where we actually do positive, uplifting things, as opposed to the stuff that people do when they're trying to escape the drama and horror. So you're right, Dawn, because the stress, you eat more, okay? You drink more alcohol. You say,
distract yourself.
I'm tired of this. Somebody give me some drugs. And so,
I deserve a treat. It's been a stressful day. I need a treat.
Right. Give me a little crystal meth. I can escape. I mean, I cannot tell you.
The
how
escalation
often
of this is never ending.
Yeah. Escapism.
We will, since we're using me as a demo here, we can go back a year ago. And there was clearly a very, very stressful situation that I was in. And it was getting worse and worse on a daily basis. And we noticed that I started having these occurring complex migraines. And they were questionable as to whether or not they were ischemias or not. And it's hard to believe right now that I had a trouble talking, but I did. For a number of times, there were 15-minute periods in which I couldn't speak at all. And that was obviously of great concern to you, my doctor at the time. And he very wisely believed that it was 100% due to the escalating stressful situation that I was in a professional basis, and literally said to me, and this is not the way this man was in general, but he said to me, you have three options. You can either take a break, you can either quit, or you can die. And since he never talked to me like that, I actually paid attention. And he was right. Obviously can talk now. And it was a real interesting lesson. And I'm really only talking about 10 months ago. And I haven't had one of those complex migraines in many, many months. So I ask you in regards to just winging it, if you can, and especially given the fact that you're in DC, the heart of most of the stress and where it comes from in the United States, at least aside from Silicon Valley, what kind of a percentage is this? How much can people start to address these chronic health issues by trying to calm down their lives, even if it costs them a lot in a material fashion?
Oh, from my standpoint, it's dramatic. And to your point, with stress and how it affected you with your complex migraines, what I often see is people's blood pressures, they go up. They go up, 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 up. And then they go on vacation and they're taking their blood pressures there, and they don't have a single blood pressure that meets the definition of high blood pressure. I mean, for me, that's a classic example of removing the stress and having that removal have a positive effect on what could have been or has been diagnosed as a chronic medical condition. In this case, it's high blood pressure. So to me, again, since mental health, I think, is a major part of overall health, addressing the stress, because the stress is all about your mental health. I mean, it's worried about your job, worried about you being able to pay the rent, being able to pay the mortgage, worried that you're going to have to move, sell your home and move and find a job. I mean,
and all these things are real.
The list
They're
goes
not
on.
just things that you can.
Yeah. What's the number one
Especially when
cause
you have
of high blood pressure?
well,
Yeah,
it's
good question, Steve.
so here's the deal. So most blood pressure is called, in medicine, we call it essential hypertension, meaning we have no clue why you have high blood pressure. And in that case, it's usually going to be genetic. That is where you say, hey, does your mama have high blood pressure? Does your dad have? And you find out that mama and daddy had high blood pressure, and the aunt had it, and grandmother and grandfather. And you can be in the best shape ever and still have high blood pressure, which is why I have such a problem in my practice, because I do have, the muscle men coming in, people, hiking and climbing mountains, and they're like, they have high blood pressure, and they're like, why do I have high blood pressure? I have done everything under the sun, and I still have high blood pressure. And I'm like, it's called your mama and your daddy. Okay, how about that?
Blame them. Blame mom and dad. There we go again.
Exactly.
Another American unique attribute. Blame mom and dad.
Absolutely. That's what they're there for. But I'm assuming there's also, you can also get high blood pressure, or you can
brought
elevate.
you into this world. How can you blame me?
Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. So let me be very clear. I mean, certainly genetics do play a big part in this, but what happens in your environment also plays a part in this. As Dawn has heard me say before, we have a set of drugs now that are very popular that have resulted in weight loss for people who had major problems with their weight. And I will tell you in my practice that when I've seen people, and I have several examples in the practice where people have lost this weight and I've been able to take them off of their blood pressures. So, blood pressure medication. So, yes, your weight can definitely influence your blood pressure. And there are other things too. I mean, it depends on, if you're taking medications, let's say you're taking ADHD medications. Well, those ADHD medications can have as a side effect high blood pressure. Same thing with, women and their hormone treatments. That can trigger high blood pressure, or as just to say, the medication can actually result in your blood pressure rising. In that case, when it's medication induced, if you remove the stimulant or the cause, then the blood pressure issue should go away. But in my practice, blood pressure, mainly genetic. I mean, and there are special medical conditions that can cause, and that we call that secondary hypertension. If you had, let's say, narrowing of your arteries to your kidneys, that can cause high blood pressure. And it's usually when that happens, your blood pressure is very difficult to control, which triggers in my mind, this is not a genetic thing, something else is going on. Your adrenals, if all of a sudden your adrenal glands went out of whack, you could have high blood pressure. So there are specific medical conditions that can cause high blood pressure. But when you ask me what is the most common, it is essential hypertension, which means nobody really has a reason other than genetics.
So, Dr. Theo, this is a perfect segue into a subject or a subject that we'll talk more about hopefully in the future, and something that a specific point that I learned listening to both Casey and Callie Means over the last number of years, and that is the pharmaceuticals. Now, pre-World War II, there wasn't any such thing as a pharmaceutical, a drug that you took for your whole life. And now, for the most part, 90% of Americans are on drugs that are at least, or pharmaceuticals, shall I say, to be polite, that are at least undetermined as to how long they're going to last. And they are probably going to be on them for a long time. Certainly the statins, as you have so carefully and lovingly told me that I will be on the statin forever. What is my problem specifically, and this is the three-body problem which can never get worked out, is even if the pharmaceutical companies, even if the medical establishment, even if the FDA, and I say that really tongue-in-cheek, has really done all of their job in determining what the real side effects are, what the real value is, and the importance are of those drugs, we're never going to know how they work together. Not especially when you're on half dozen of them or more, like a lot of people like me. What do you think about that? I mean, it was, other than the fact is the idea that we really need to try, at least to aspire to get off them as much as possible, right?
Okay, so here's my take on that. Because I tell people all the time, I'm not a pill pusher. Not doing it. If you tell me you don't want to take pills, then I'm like, okay, how about we employ non-pharmaceutical plans to address your medical concern. So let's take blood pressure
Here we go.
for answer. So
let's say I know where this is going.
Yeah, you do know where it's going. So let's say that your blood pressure at the moment that we're discussing it actually fits the definition of high blood pressure. And you say, oh, I feel good. I ain't trying to take any medication. Like,
for the record, my blood pressure is great. It's the diabetic stuff that's the problem. So just to the audience.
We'll get to your diabetes, okay? We will get there. But we're using high blood pressure as an example. So if you say you're not trying to take medication, I'm like, okay, well, let's do a non-pharmaceutical approach. You increase your aerobic exercise. You take those bag of potato chips that you've been eating day in and day out, and you put them aside. And come back to me in 6 months, okay? And you measure your blood pressure, and at the end of 6 months, you still fit that definition using everything that you've been using. Then you might need to consider a different path. How about that?
Sometimes it's easier just to take the pill.
I'm just, but I'm saying,
or sometimes you need it.
Seriously, I'm not saying this tongue in cheek, because sometimes I've done this and patients have made these dramatic changes and their blood pressure goes down. I'm like, yay! There is many paths to success, and pharmaceuticals is only one path. Nobody's suggesting, as a physician, that you have to take pills to get to your goal.
Oh, I think there are. You're not, and I certainly most genuine and good American doctors don't. But I have to, and this is a different subject, obviously, for a different Don Sullivan show. But there is a multi-trillion-dollar industry out there that is maintains its multi-trillion-dollar status because we as Americans do find it easier to take pills, and a lot of them together.
Not always the only path.
But but your very sage and wise, loving advice as the doctor that you are is exactly the right approach overall. And I would ask you this as another perfect segue: how important, and I know the answer to this, and I'm involved myself to a certain extent right now, how important is this to introduce these concepts immediately to the youngest of American citizens, that is the toddlers, our grandkids? How important is it to get it right at the beginning with them?
I think it's very important. I mean, health should start as soon as you can actually comprehend what health is all about. So
they can't comprehend it. Sometimes they won't eat anything other than chicken fingers every day.
But no, and this is where parents
called you don't get fed.
But this
easier
is where
said than done, my friend.
If mama's taking you over to McDonald's every day, That's a problem. And of course, I grew up being able to sing. What was it? It was Big Mac. It was 2 off beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese,
Oh yeah.
pickles, onions on a
Pickles,
sesame seed
onions
bun.
on a
And if you
sesame
could
seed
say that in
bun.
front of the register, they would give you a free Big Mac. This is how, I grew up with that kind of philosophy. But I think now, as an older adult and recognizing that having Big Macs every day, that's a problem. That's not going to work.
We were a house where, dinner was what mom made and you were eating that. There weren't choices. And if you didn't finish your vegetables,
but
you
you
didn't
don't
get to leave the
remember-
table.
okay.
I used to hide
You don't remember
vegetables
2
under
years
the
old.
table.
Helped if you had a dog. Right?
Well, I mean,
Or
this gets into a bigger problem. This is one of the structural issues that come up when we talk about health. It's one thing for me to say, oh, you should do X, Y, and Z. It's quite another if someone looks at me and says, Dr. Hodge, I don't have that kind of money. This is what I have access to. This is what I have to do. So that speaks to a larger problem that I think is,
I'm a single mom. I got to get my kid to eat.
Right,
I just
right.
came home from
I get it,
work.
I get it.
And all the 3-year-old will
Tough.
eat is chicken fingers.
Right. That's
Certain
exactly
foods are
right.
more expensive than others. A lot of the fast food, it's cheap.
Exactly. And
It's
that
cheap and
speaks
it's
to a
there.
larger problem in terms of our food industry and actually supplying, healthy options at an affordable price. That is a problem because I think we all know that's not necessarily an option that everyone has. Affordable nutritional options.
All right. Now that's the perfect moment for the segue into future Don Sullivan shows. And Dr. Hodge, we are hopefully, unless you have been totally turned off by this particular episode of the Don Sullivan Show, and I'm scared of whatever it is that we're talking about here, and my very look and feel at the moment. I hope you can come back on and talk to us more about all of these things, HIV and prevention and other infectious diseases, as well as the food industry, because we're going to have a lot of discussions along these lines. But I do want to end this up with one piece of advice from you. What do you think are just give me 2 or 3 specific things that the average American can do today, whoever they are, whether that they're a poor single mom who is really living on government assistance, or somebody who has lived their whole life with terrible habits and can't figure their way through a grocery store to find anything else other than that bag of potato chips. What do you think they can do to make things better and just improve a little bit today or this week?
That's a toughie, Don, because of the obstacles that people have in front of them, to include finances and safety and housing and all of those things. But if I were to give you a basic answer, I would say, okay, increase your aerobic activity. I mean, if you can walk safely around your neighborhood in the middle of the day or at any time that you can, that your job and your circumstances will allow, then even if it's going up and down the stairs. I mean, going up and down the stairs, that's, as Don, we've had our workouts running up and down stairs, and that's a real workout. So I would certainly, instead of taking the elevator, take the stairs. I mean, these are little things
That's really
that you
great
can
advice.
do to actually enhance your health. These are the little things I would say. So, take the stairs, don't take the elevator, walk around your neighborhood, because people tell me all the time, I don't have time to run. I'm like, well, how about you walk around your neighborhood? As long as it's safe, because there are situations where walking around the neighborhood, you may not get back home because of safety
Sit-ups or
issues.
push-ups.
But I mean, even something simpler than that, though. Like what about something as simple as just eat one vegetable before you eat all the
If
other
you can
garbage you're
afford to
gonna
get
eat?
the vegetable, then that's cool. Because of
Drink a
course that
glass
would
of
be like,
water,
okay, eat an
maybe
apple,
before.
eat
an apple.
Get
these are
kale in your
healthy
life.
things.
You need to get kale into
the
your
unholy
life.
alliance between
Kale,
software,
it's all
unholy
about
alliance
kale,
between
especially this time
cardboard
of
and
year.
lettuce, and
Kale.
I'll stick with that.
It's a superfood. A little kale,
It is a
butternut
super.
squash.
It is
It's
a
good for you.
superfood. So you're right. Eating a vegetable a day and walking up and down the stairs, those are 2 simple things, Don, that you can do.
All right. With that, Well, this is really putting you on the spot, Theo, but where is this going?
I mean, Don, technology I mean, I can tell you, just even watching my nephew grow up, did he exercise? No. The only thing he did was look at, and still does, and he's 24 now. Bless his heart. He's looking at his cell phone the whole time. People are so entranced
He looks like
in
he's in pretty good shape,
social
though.
media and all of this stuff. They first of all, they've forgotten how to develop the skills to socialize. That's one thing. So as we become more and more advanced, people lose the ability to actually be able to talk to each other. That's a problem. People get so entranced in their job that they become that much more stressed. So I see mental health issues zooming out of, well, they're zooming out of control for obvious reasons now, but they were headed that way before this drama began. I mean, I can't tell you how much generalized anxiety I see here in my practice prior to all of this. I don't see this getting better unless we're suddenly like Europe and take, a month off at a time. Do you think anybody over here takes a month off at a time? That don't happen over here. Unless
Yeah,
you're
they
a
fired
teacher.
me. They fired me, so that was probably the best thing in the world that ever happened to me.
That was very
They
thoughtful.
told
of
us
them.
to get lost.
That's exactly. I tell people all the time, and you have to hear me. This is the last thing I'm gonna say. I tell people this all the time because I'm like, when was your last vacation? And they give me some ridiculous amount of time. And I'm like, look, let me tell you something. If you drop dead, someone somewhere may cry a tear and then they'll hire somebody else. Nobody's last word on this earth is, I wish I had spent more time at work. It's not going to happen. Take your time.
That's a fact. For sure.
And with that, I can't imagine a better way to end this episode of the Don Sullivan Show. And we have been so privileged and honored to have Dr. Theo Hodge on for the first time. And Steve, say goodbye to everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Theo, for coming on. And Don, I think at some point we should launch a pizza that has kale on it. Let's bring the goodness of New Jersey.
Kale pizza.
Kale pizza, yeah.
What an idea! I'm not sure we're not dipping into some other podcasters.
Don. I only have good ones.
Turf in New Jersey, but maybe we'll have to explore that. All right, thank you, Dr. Theo Hodge, and remember, everyone, thank you for listening. Download the episodes, listen to them all, and just remember, every at-bat is situational.